The morning rush at Blue Moon Diner was always hectic, but today felt different. Steam rose from the coffee machines, mixing with the smell of bacon and maple syrup in the air. The young waitress had dark circles under her eyes, evidence of the 90-day streak of double shifts she'd been pulling. Her feet ached in her worn-out shoes as she balanced 3 plates of pancakes while refilling coffee cups. "Just keep going," she whispered to herself, weaving between the packed tables. The diner, a beloved spot in downtown Portland for over 30 years, was busier than ever, but somehow always short-staffed. The checkered floors that had once shone now looked dull under the warm lighting, much like how she felt inside. It wasn't supposed to be this way. When she first started working here, the diner felt like a second home. The regular customers knew her by name, and she knew their usual orders by heart. Mr. Park always wanted his eggs over easy with extra crispy hash browns. The kind elderly lady who sat by the window every Wednesday morning needed her coffee with 2 creams, no sugar. But lately, everything had changed. The old owner had passed away 3 months ago, and nobody had seen the new owner yet. The manager kept scheduling fewer staff members for busier shifts, claiming it was to cut costs. This morning, they were 3 servers short, and a line of waiting customers stretched out the door. Her hands trembled slightly as she poured coffee for a businessman who had been complaining about his cold eggs for the past 10 minutes. "I'm very sorry about that, sir. I'll get you fresh ones right away," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "This is ridiculous," the man grumbled, checking his expensive watch for the 3rd time. "I've been coming here for years, and the service has never been this bad." She bit her lip, holding back words she couldn't afford to say. Her rent was due next week, and this job, despite everything, was all she had. The weight of the coffee pot felt heavier with each pour, like it was filled with all the stress and exhaustion of the past 3 months. The kitchen doors swung open with a loud bang, making her jump. Another order was up, but there was nobody available to serve it. The cook was shouting about tickets piling up, while the single busboy rushed between tables, trying to clear dishes fast enough to seat the growing line of waiting customers. A baby started crying somewhere in the diner, and someone else was waving frantically for their check. The noise seemed to grow louder and louder, pushing against her ears like a physical force. She could feel a headache building behind her eyes, but there was no time for breaks today. As she hurried past the counter, she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror-like surface of the coffee machine. Her once neat uniform was spotted with syrup and coffee stains, her hair escaping from its neat bun. She hardly recognized herself anymore. Just then, the door chimed again as a well-dressed man in expensive sunglasses walked in, heading straight for a booth without waiting to be seated. He carried himself with an air of importance that seemed to demand immediate attention. Little did she know, this customer would change everything about her life at Blue Moon Diner, though not in any way she could have expected. The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. Another day was just beginning, but it would turn out to be unlike any other in the diner's long history. The coffee pot in her hand felt warm and familiar, but in just a few moments, it would become the catalyst for an extraordinary chain of events that nobody could have predicted. The well-dressed man sat down at the booth, not even bothering to remove his sunglasses indoors. He drummed his fingers on the table impatiently, checking his watch every few seconds as if time itself should bend to his will. The waitress took a deep breath, grabbed a fresh menu, and walked over to his table, trying her best to put on a friendly smile despite her exhaustion. "Good morning, welcome to Blue Moon Diner," she said, placing the menu in front of him. Before she could even finish her usual greeting, he cut her off with a wave of his hand. "I don't need a menu. Just bring me a black coffee and make it quick," he said, not even looking up from his phone. His tone was sharp, like someone used to giving orders and having them followed immediately. She nodded and turned towards the coffee station, her shoulders tense. The diner was still packed, and now the toast for table 7 was burning, while the eggs for table 3 were getting cold. The pressure felt like a pot about to boil over. When she returned with his coffee, he was typing furiously on his phone. Without looking up, he muttered, "What took so long? Is everyone here this incompetent?" The word incompetent hit her like a slap. 3 months of double shifts, of missing her mom's birthday, of skipping lunch breaks to cover for absent coworkers. All of it came rushing back. The coffee pot in her hand suddenly felt very heavy. "Excuse me," she said, her voice barely steady. "We're doing our best here." He finally looked up, his expression cold. "Your best. I've been sitting here for 4 minutes waiting for a simple cup of coffee. The service here has gone completely downhill. I remember when this place used to be worth visiting." Something inside her snapped. Maybe it was the way he said, "worth visiting," or maybe it was just that this was the final straw after months of similar treatment. Without thinking, without considering the consequences, she lifted the coffee pot. Time seemed to slow down. The hot coffee arsed through the air like a brown waterfall. Several customers gasped. The businessman's expensive suit was no match for the full pot of fresh coffee that landed squarely on his chest and lap. He jumped up with a shout, coffee dripping from his clothes. The sunglasses fell off his face, clattering onto the table. And that's when she saw his eyes. Eyes she'd seen before in the old photographs hanging on the diner's walls. The entire restaurant fell silent. You could have heard a fork drop. The other waitresses froze in place, recognition dawning on their faces. The cook poked his head out from the kitchen, mouth open in shock. The man slowly wiped his face with a napkin, his expression unreadable. "Well," he said quietly, "I suppose this is one way to meet my staff." The waitress felt her stomach drop to her feet. This wasn't just any rude customer. This was the new owner, the son of the man who had built Blue Moon Diner from nothing. She had just dumped an entire pot of hot coffee on her boss. The coffee pot slipped from her fingers, bouncing harmlessly on the carpeted floor. Her mind raced through all the consequences: losing her job, not making rent, having to move back home. But strangely, the owner wasn't yelling. He wasn't even calling for security. Instead, he was looking around the diner with new eyes, taking in the exhausted staff, the overwhelmed busboy, the line of waiting customers. His gaze finally settled back on the waitress, who stood rooted to the spot, waiting for the axe to fall. "I think," he said slowly, dabbing at his ruined suit with a handful of napkins, "you and I need to have a conversation. In private." His voice wasn't angry. If anything, it sounded thoughtful, almost curious. The other customers watched in stunned silence as he gestured toward the office in the back. The waitress followed him, her legs feeling like they were made of jelly. She had no idea that this moment, as terrible as it seemed, was about to change not just her life, but the entire future of Blue Moon Diner. The back office of Blue Moon Diner was small and cluttered, nothing like what you'd expect from a business owner's space. Old schedules and invoices covered the desk, and the walls were lined with faded photographs showing the diner through the years. The waitress stood nervously by the door while the owner, still dripping coffee, settled into the creaky office chair. "You know," he said, surprisingly calm for someone wearing a coffee-soaked suit, "my father started as a dishwasher in this very diner 30 years ago." He picked up a framed photo from the desk, wiping away years of dust with his thumb. He saved every penny until he could buy it from the previous owner. He used to tell me stories about what it was like working his way up. The waitress shifted uncomfortably, unsure if she should speak. Her heart was still racing from what had happened in the dining room. "Sir, I'm so sorry about the coffee. I know I should pack up my things and—" He held up his hand, cutting her off. "Before we get to that, I want to know something. How long have you been working here?" "Almost 2 years," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "And those double shifts I've been hearing about, how long has that been going on?" She was surprised by the question. 3 months. sir. Ever since, she trailed off, not wanting to mention his father's passing. Ever since my father died, he finished for her. You can say it. That's why I'm here after all. He leaned back in the chair, studying her face. Tell me something. Why did you really throw that coffee at me? The question caught her off guard. She expected to be fired, not interviewed. But something in his calm demeanor made her brave enough to tell the truth. It wasn't just about you, she began slowly. Though you were pretty rude out there. To her surprise, the corner of his mouth twitched in what might have been a smile. It's everything. We're understaffed, overworked, and nobody seems to care. Your father, he knew everyone's names. He cared about us. But since he's been gone, it's like we're just numbers on a spreadsheet. The owner nodded thoughtfully, looking at more photos on the wall. I saw a lot this morning, before you turned me into a human coffee filter. This time, there was definitely a hint of humor in his voice. I watched you help that elderly couple with their order, even though you were swamped. I saw you split your tips with the busboy when he dropped his. Her eyes widened. How long had he been watching? I've spent the last week coming in at different times, watching how things run, he continued. Or don't run, as the case may be. The truth is, I inherited this place, but I know nothing about running a diner. I've been in corporate offices my whole career, dealing with spreadsheets and profit margins. He stood up and walked to the window overlooking the dining room. My father's last words to me weren't about money or success. He made me promise to take care of his diner family. But looking at what's happening out there, I've failed that promise pretty spectacularly. The waitress watched as he turned back to face her, his expression serious but not unkind. I came in today playing the role of a difficult customer because I wanted to see how the staff handled pressure. I never expected someone to actually stand up to me, much less with a pot of coffee. He actually chuckled. My dry cleaner is going to have quite a story to tell. She felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment, but he wasn't finished. What I saw today wasn't just a stressed-out waitress losing her temper. I saw someone who cares enough about this place to risk everything standing up for it. That's exactly the kind of person I need to help me turn things around. The waitress blinked in confusion. I'm sorry. What? I'm offering you a new position, he said, straightening his coffee-stained tie. This place needs someone who understands what it's like on the front lines. Someone who knows the staff, the customers, and most importantly, someone who isn't afraid to stand up for what's right, even if their methods are a bit unconventional. She stared at him, not quite believing what she was hearing. This wasn't at all how she expected this conversation to go. The morning sun streamed through the office window, catching the steam still rising from his suit, and in that moment, the future of Blue Moon Diner took an unexpected turn that would change everything. The next few hours in the office felt like a dream. The waitress sat across from the coffee-stained owner, sharing everything she'd seen and experienced over the past 2 years. Her voice grew stronger as she talked about the problems that had been eating away at the diner's heart. The schedule is a mess, she explained, pulling out a crumpled piece of paper from her apron. Look at this. We have 3 new hires who quit last week because they were thrown into breakfast rush without any training. And this Tuesday, there's only 1 cook scheduled for dinner service. The owner leaned forward, genuinely interested. Tell me more about the training. What was it like when my father was here? She smiled for the first time that morning, remembering. He made sure everyone knew every job in the diner. Even the dishwashers learned how to work the grill. He said we needed to understand each other's jobs to work as a team. As she spoke, the owner took notes on a legal pad, occasionally nodding. The sun climbed higher outside, and the breakfast rush died down. Through the office window, they could see the remaining customers, the tired staff, the worn-out equipment that needed replacing. Yesterday, she continued, our best cook almost quit because the freezer broke down for the 3rd time this month. We lost hundreds of dollars in food, and nobody seemed to care. Under your father, that would have been fixed the same day. The owner put down his pen and rubbed his temples. "I've been looking at the books all wrong," he admitted. "I saw the costs of repairs and maintenance as numbers to cut. I never thought about how it affects the people working here." Just then, there was a knock at the office door. The busboy poked his head in, looking nervous. Sorry to interrupt, but the coffee machine is acting up again, and we've got a line of customers." The owner looked at his watch, surprised to see how much time had passed. "How about we continue this conversation on the floor?" he suggested, standing up. "I want to see everything firsthand." Together, they walked through the diner. The owner stopped at each station, introducing himself to the staff properly this time. He helped the busboy clear tables, burned his fingers trying to fix the coffee machine, and even attempted to work the register, making a complete mess of a simple order. "Okay," he laughed, after having to void his third transaction. "I clearly have a lot to learn, but that's exactly why I need your help." He turned to the waitress. "You know this place inside and out. You know what works and what doesn't. I need someone who can bridge the gap between management and staff." A customer waved for service, and without thinking, the waitress started to head over. The owner gently caught her arm. "That's not your job anymore," he said kindly. "Your job now is to help me fix this place." She looked at him, still uncertain. "But what exactly would I be doing?" "Everything," he replied simply. "Help me rebuild the training program. Create fair schedules. Listen to the staff's concerns and actually do something about them. Be the voice I've been missing. The voice of someone who knows what it's really like to work here." The lunch rush was beginning, and the diner was coming alive again. The clatter of plates, the sizzle of the grill, the ding of the service bell. It was a familiar symphony she knew by heart. "There's just one condition," the owner added, a slight smile playing on his lips. "No more throwing coffee at people, no matter how much they might deserve it." She couldn't help but laugh. "Even if they're wearing really expensive suits." "Especially then," he chuckled, looking down at his stained clothes. "I think I've learned my lesson about going undercover." As they watched the diner in motion, both knew this was more than just a job offer. It was a chance to honor the old owner's legacy while building something new. The waitress looked around at her coworkers, her work family, and made her decision. This was where she belonged, not just serving tables, but helping to make Blue Moon Diner the place it was always meant to be. The coffee machine chose that moment to sputter back to life, as if giving its own approval to the new partnership. The morning's chaos had somehow led to an opportunity neither of them could have predicted, proving that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected moments, even if they're served with a side of spilled coffee. Over cups of fresh coffee, served in cups this time, not thrown, the waitress and owner sat in a quiet corner booth after the lunch rush. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the checkered floor as she opened up about the deeper problems that had been plaguing the diner. "The breaking point came about a month ago," she explained, stirring her coffee absently. "A customer was screaming at one of our teenage servers over a mistake with his order. Poor kid was in tears, but our manager just stood there, doing nothing. Said we couldn't risk losing customers by standing up to them." The owner's face darkened. "That's not how my father would have handled it." "No, it wasn't," she agreed. "Your father had a sign in the kitchen that said, 'Family First.' He meant us, his staff. But after he passed, that sign disappeared, just like everything else he stood for." She pulled out a small notebook from her apron, its pages dog-eared and coffee-stained. "I started keeping track of things. The broken equipment that never got fixed. The missing supplies we keep requesting. The way some customers treat us like we're not even human." As she shared story after story, the owner's expression shifted from concern to determination. He learned about the cook who worked through a fever because there was no sick leave policy. The single mom who lost shifts because she couldn't find last-minute childcare. the elderly dishwasher who needed a stool to work but wasn't allowed to use one. Yesterday, she continued, her voice getting stronger, I overheard two regular customers talking about how different the place feels now. They said it used to be warm, like coming home. Now it's just another diner. The owner reached for the old photos on the wall, studying his father's smiling face surrounded by happy staff members. You know what's ironic? He said softly. I spent years in business school learning about efficiency and profit margins. But my father, who never finished high school, understood something I'm just now getting. A business is only as good as the people who run it. Just then, the ancient coffee machine made a terrible grinding noise. Everyone in the diner winced, used to its daily protests. The owner watched as 3 different staff members went through their usual routine of hitting it in specific spots until it sputtered back to life. Look at that, he said, shaking his head. They've learned to work around the problems instead of having them fixed. That's not adaptation. That's survival. The waitress nodded. We've all learned to survive, but we used to thrive. He pulled out his phone and pulled up some photos. I found these in my father's old files last night. Look at these profit margins from 5 years ago. He slid the phone across the table. They're better than what we have now, even though we're cutting corners everywhere. The waitress studied the numbers, then looked up with realization dawning on her face. Because happy staff means happy customers. Exactly, the owner replied, warming to the subject. My father wasn't just being kind when he treated his staff well. He was being smart. People work better when they feel valued. They provide better service when they're not exhausted. They stay longer when they feel supported. Outside, the afternoon light was fading, casting a golden glow through the windows. The diner was in its quiet period between lunch and dinner, a perfect time for making plans. The waitress watched as the owner pulled out a fresh notepad. Okay, he said, uncapping his pen. Let's start from the beginning. Tell me everything that needs to change, starting with that coffee machine. For the next hour, they talked about real solutions. Not just quick fixes, but real, lasting changes that would bring back the heart and soul of Blue Moon Diner. The waitress felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. As they wrapped up their conversation, the dinner shift staff began arriving. They moved cautiously around the owner, still unsure what to make of the morning's events. But something was different now. The air felt lighter somehow, charged with possibility. The owner stood up, straightening his still damp tie. Ready to help me turn this place around? He asked, extending his hand. She looked at his offered hand, then around at the diner, her second home for the past 2 years. Yes, she said firmly, standing up. But first, maybe you should change that suit. The next morning arrived with a buzz of excitement in the air. The owner had returned wearing a casual button-down shirt instead of his usual suit, and he rolled up his sleeves to help with the morning prep. The staff watched in amazement as their former waitress, now wearing a name badge that read Assistant Manager, led the morning meeting. First things first, she announced, standing in front of the gathered staff. We're fixing the coffee machine today. The repair person is already on their way. A cheer went up from the morning crew, making her smile. But that's just the beginning. She handed out fresh notebooks to everyone. Your ideas matter here. Write down everything you think could make this place better, for you and for our customers. No idea is too small. The owner stepped forward, clearing his throat. I owe all of you an apology, he said, his voice sincere. I've been looking at this place through spreadsheets and numbers, but my father knew better. He knew this diner wasn't just about food, it was about people. An older waitress who'd worked there for 15 years wiped away tears. Your father used to say we were all his kids, she said softly. He meant it too. The owner nodded, emotion flickering across his face. Well, it's time we got back to that. Starting today, things are going to be different. And they were. The morning unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. The new assistant manager moved between tables and kitchen with practiced ease, but now she was doing more than just serving coffee. She was teaching, guiding, supporting. When a new server got overwhelmed by a large party, she stepped in to help, showing him how to organize his orders efficiently. When the grill cook started falling behind, she jumped on the line to help plate dishes, something she'd learned during her 2 years of watching and learning every position. The owner, true to his word, worked alongside everyone. He bussed tables, ran dishes, and even attempted to work the grill, though after nearly burning a stack of pancakes, he admitted some jobs were better left to the experts. Around noon, the repair person arrived for the coffee machine. Instead of just fixing the immediate problem, the owner had them do a complete maintenance check on all the kitchen equipment. Prevention is cheaper than replacement, he explained, something his father had always believed. During the lunch rush, something magical happened. The staff, energized by the changes and feeling supported for the first time in months, worked together like a well-oiled machine. Orders flew out of the kitchen, coffee flowed smoothly, and customers noticed the difference. "The energy in here feels like the old days," one regular customer commented, smiling as she sipped her coffee. "It's like the heart's back in the place." The new assistant manager beamed with pride as she watched her coworkers, her family, working together. She caught the owner's eye across the diner, and they shared a knowing look. This was just the beginning. In the afternoon lull, she gathered everyone for another meeting. The notebooks were now filled with ideas: better scheduling systems, updated menus, team training sessions, even community outreach programs. Every suggestion was discussed with respect and consideration. "Remember that sign your father had?" she asked the owner. "The one about family first." He nodded, wondering where she was going with this. She pulled something from behind her back, a new sign, freshly painted. It read, "Family first, every customer, every worker, every day." The owner stared at it for a long moment, then smiled. "Perfect," he said. "Hang it right where the old one used to be." As the sign went up in its place of honor, the staff gathered around. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, catching the fresh paint and making it gleam. In that moment, everyone could feel it. The spirit of the old Blue Moon Diner wasn't just coming back. It was evolving into something even better. The new assistant manager looked around at her team, at the owner who had turned out to be so different from what she'd first thought, at the diner that had become her home. Sometimes the best opportunities come from the most unexpected moments, she thought. Even if those moments involve throwing coffee at your future boss. 6 months flew by like pages in a calendar flipping in the wind. The Blue Moon Diner had transformed, but not just on the surface. The changes ran deep, touching every corner of the business and every person who worked there. One sunny morning, the assistant manager stood in the doorway, taking in the scene before her. The once tired dining room now sparkled with fresh paint and clean windows. The old, squeaky ceiling fans had been replaced with quiet new ones that kept the air flowing comfortably. But the biggest changes weren't the ones you could see. The teenage server who once cried over angry customers now moved confidently between tables, handling difficult situations with a smile. He'd been through the new training program, where experienced staff shared their wisdom about handling tough situations with grace. "Watch this," he said proudly to the assistant manager as he approached a table where a customer was complaining about slow service. Instead of panicking, he listened calmly, apologized sincerely, and offered solutions. The customer's frown melted into a smile, and by the end of the meal, they were laughing together. In the kitchen, the old tension had disappeared. The new scheduling system meant they were always properly staffed, and the repaired equipment worked smoothly. The cook who had almost quit over the broken freezer was now teaching new hires, sharing secret recipes that had been passed down from the original owner. "Remember how we used to prop the freezer door closed with a broom?" He chuckled, showing a trainee how to perfectly flip a pancake. "Now look at us. Everything works like it should, and we can focus on making good food instead of fixing broken equipment. The owner, who still helped out during busy times, had traded his expensive suits for comfortable work clothes. He sat at the counter, reviewing the latest customer feedback cards, a new system the assistant manager had implemented. "Listen to this one," he called out, holding up a card. "Came in feeling down about life. Left feeling like I had dinner with family. Thank you for making me smile. That's what my father always wanted this place to be." The elderly dishwasher now had his stool, and something more: respect. When he mentioned he used to be a baker in his home country, they gave him a chance to make desserts. His homemade pies had become so popular they had to start taking advance orders. "Life is funny," he said, carefully crimping the edge of an apple pie. "At my age, I thought I was finished learning new things. Now look at me. I'm teaching others my recipes." The single mom who almost lost her job over childcare issues was now thriving under the new flexible scheduling system. During school holidays, her kids could even be found doing homework in a quiet corner booth, watched over by the entire staff. "This isn't just a job anymore," she told a customer who asked about the changes. "It's a place where we look out for each other." Even the regulars had noticed the difference. The morning coffee crowd, who used to rush in and out, now lingered over their cups, chatting with staff and each other. The diner had become more than a place to eat. It was a community hub, just like in the old days. The assistant manager walked through the dining room, adjusting a flower vase here, chatting with a customer there. Her notebook was still in her apron pocket, but now it was filled with ideas for the future instead of complaints about the present. The owner joined her by the window, where they could see the line of customers waiting for breakfast. "You know what's amazing?" he said, sipping his coffee, properly served in a cup, as he liked to remind everyone with a grin. "Our profits are higher than ever, but we're spending more on our staff and equipment. My father was right all along." She nodded, watching as the morning sun lit up the family first sign. "It's like a circle," she said. "Happy staff make happy customers, who make a successful business, which lets us take better care of our staff." Just then, the coffee machine, the new one they'd installed last month, hummed contentedly, as if agreeing. The sound mixed with the laughter of customers, the clink of plates, and the sizzle of the grill, the perfect music of a diner that had found its heart again. 1 year after the famous coffee-throwing incident, the Blue Moon Diner was hosting a special celebration. The tables had been pushed together to form one long family-style setup, and the smell of fresh bread and coffee filled the air. Staff members, both old and new, gathered around with their families for what had become a monthly tradition: family dinner night. The owner stood up, tapping his glass gently with a spoon. "You know," he began, looking around at the familiar faces, "a year ago, I thought I knew everything about running a business. Then I got a coffee bath that changed my life." Everyone laughed, including the assistant manager, who playfully raised her coffee cup in his direction. "But seriously," he continued, "what happened that day opened my eyes. My father didn't build this place with fancy business degrees or complicated spreadsheets. He built it with heart, trust, and a belief that taking care of people was the most important thing." The elderly pie baker brought out a special anniversary cake he'd made, decorated with a coffee cup design that made everyone burst out laughing. "This is why we succeed," he said, his eyes twinkling. "We can laugh at ourselves and learn from our mistakes." The teenage server, now training new employees himself, shared stories about his first days. "Remember how scared I used to be of angry customers?" he asked, grinning. "Now I teach others how to handle tough situations. Life's funny that way." A local newspaper reporter sat in the corner, taking notes. The diner's turnaround had caught attention in the business community. Other restaurant owners had been calling, asking how they'd managed to increase profits while also improving working conditions. "It's not complicated," the assistant manager explained to the reporter. "We just put people first. Everything else followed naturally. She pointed to the wall where photos of staff birthdays, achievements, and celebrations hung alongside the old pictures from the diner's early days. The single mom's kids ran around, helping to serve dessert to everyone. They'd become the diner's unofficial mascots, and customers often asked about them. "My children used to worry when I went to work," she told a reporter. "Now they beg to come with me. That's what a real workplace family looks like." The cook emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. "You want to know the real secret," he said, joining the conversation. "Look around. Nobody here is just doing their job. We're all building something together." He was right. The dining room was filled with stories of transformation. The busboy who'd been struggling with English was now fluently chatting with customers, thanks to the free language classes they'd started offering after hours. The shy hostess had discovered a talent for social media and now managed the diner's popular online presence. "Last week," the owner shared, "a business consultant told me we're doing everything wrong. Said we spend too much on staff training, our break room is too nice, and our benefits are too generous." He chuckled. Then I showed him our numbers from the past year. The assistant manager smiled, remembering how different things were a year ago. "Sometimes the best way to do business isn't about business at all," she said. "It's about building a community." As if to prove her point, several regular customers had stopped by to join the celebration. They'd brought cards and small gifts, treating the occasion like a family birthday party. One elderly couple, who'd been coming to the diner for 20 years, got teary-eyed talking about the changes they'd seen. "It feels like the old days again," the wife said, patting the assistant manager's hand. "But somehow even better. You can feel the love in this place." The evening wound down with stories and laughter. Someone had brought out an old photo album, and they all gathered around to look at pictures from the diner's history. The owner found one of his father on opening day, standing proudly in front of the brand new sign. "Dad would have loved this," he said softly, looking around at his diner family. "He always said success wasn't about what you had, but about who you shared it with." As the sun set outside, casting a warm glow through the windows, the Blue Moon Diner glowed with more than just light. It radiated the kind of success that couldn't be measured in dollars and cents. The success of a dream realized, a community united, and a family forged from the most unexpected beginnings. The story of the coffee-throwing incident at Blue Moon Diner spread far beyond their small town. On a bright spring morning, the assistant manager and owner found themselves standing in front of a room full of restaurant owners and business students at the local community college. They'd been invited to share their story of how one moment of frustration led to an incredible transformation. "You might have heard about how I got this job," the assistant manager began, earning chuckles from the audience. "Yes, I'm the waitress who threw coffee at her boss. Not exactly the traditional path to management." The owner stepped forward, grinning. "And I'm the guy who deserved it. I came in thinking I knew everything about business because I had an expensive degree. Turns out, the best business lesson I ever got came with a side of hot coffee." Someone raised their hand. "But how did you actually make it work?" "Most restaurants can't afford to put employees first." The owner shook his head. "That's exactly backward. You can't afford not to put employees first. Let me show you something." He clicked to a slide showing their turnover rates. "A year ago, we were losing staff every week. Training new people constantly was costing us thousands. Now, we haven't had anyone quit in 8 months." The assistant manager pointed to another slide. "And look at our customer reviews. When our staff is happy, they make our customers happy. Happy customers come back more often and bring their friends. It's simple math." A skeptical business owner in the front row spoke up. "But what about the costs? All these benefits and programs must be expensive." The owner smiled. "Let me tell you about costs," he said, pulling out his father's old accounting book. "See these repair bills from last year. Constant equipment breakdowns because we tried to save money by skipping maintenance. These overtime costs because we were understaffed, the wasted food because untrained cooks made mistakes. Being cheap is expensive. The assistant manager shared stories about their new initiatives. The training program that paired experienced staff with newcomers. The suggestion box that had led to their popular weekly specials. The flexible scheduling system that helped parents balance work and family. Last month, she said proudly, a young server came to me crying. Not because a customer was mean to her, but because she'd finally saved enough from her steady job with us to register for college classes. That's the kind of tears I like to see. The owner added, my father used to say that a business is like a garden. You can't just take and take. You have to plant seeds, water them, and give them time to grow. We're finally doing that. They showed pictures of their monthly family dinners, the community events they hosted, the learning programs they'd started. Each image told a story of lives changed and community built. But you know what really matters? The assistant manager asked, showing their latest staff photo. Look at these smiles. They're real. Everyone in this picture knows they matter, they belong, and they have a future with us. After the presentation, a young business student approached them. I always dreamed of opening my own restaurant, she said shyly. But everyone tells me it's too risky, too hard. Your story gives me hope. The owner and assistant manager exchanged glances. Want to come see how we do things? The owner offered. We're always happy to share what we've learned. That evening, back at the diner, they watched the sunset through the freshly cleaned windows. The place was buzzing with its usual warm energy, customers chatting, staff moving efficiently, but without rush, the new coffee machine humming contentedly. You know what's funny? The assistant manager said, adjusting the family first sign that had become their symbol of change. A year ago, I thought throwing that coffee would be the biggest mistake of my life. Turns out it was the best thing I ever did. The owner laughed. For both of us. Though maybe next time you want to suggest improvements, we could try talking first. Deal. She smiled, picking up the coffee pot. But I'm keeping this handy, just in case. They both knew she was joking. The Blue Moon Diner had become more than just a success story. It was a blueprint for how caring about people could transform a business. Every day, they proved that the key to success wasn't just about serving good food or making money. It was about building a place where everyone, staff, customers, and community, felt at home. The coffee throwing incident had become legendary in their town, a reminder that sometimes the best changes start with a splash. But the real story wasn't about that one moment. It was about all the moments that came after, when people came together to build something special, one cup of coffee at a time.